Okay, we're on.
Can we have a call to order and a flag salute?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I've got one question off the bat here. The flag in Town Square is not flying at half-mast
In the plaza,
in the plaza?
which is county property,
Yeah, not your deal, right?
I can pass the buck with a clear conscience on that
Okay,
one. Yeah.
well, I just thought I'd bring that up.
If you call, it's the jail that they're in charge of putting the flag up and down. I used to keep charge of it every morning.
Well, would you get on that?
Okay, tomorrow I'll do it. I'll look out and see.
All right.
You had me scared. I thought I did something wrong.
No, not you, Jacob. Okay, consent agenda. Planning Commission minutes dated October 9th, 2018.
Move we accept them. Minute.
Second.
Okay, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll abstain because I was absent for the meeting.
All right, we have one abstention. Okay, moving on to topics from the floor. Do we have anybody who would like to discuss anything? We got 5 minutes each.
Hi, Sean Straub Harrison again. I would like to ask you guys to review your tree council that you have on, it's in your guys' literature in regards, it's supposed to run parallel with the Planning Commission, and there currently is not an active tree council. So with all the building and everything that's going on, I would like to ask that you guys look into that and see about working with the city to enforce an actual tree council that's supposed to be running with the Planning Commission.
What is a tree council?
There is something in the code that
There
talks
is.
about it,
Yeah,
and I don't know if it's ever existed.
it's never existed,
I don't know how long it's been in the code, but
It's
there's
never-
something.
but it's in your code.
John, your objective.
My objective is just to see about you guys enacting a tree council to run as it states in your code that's supposed to run parallel with the Planning Commission. You can look it up. So it's in the code. And it says that there's a tree council that's supposed to be delegated, I guess, by you guys to help make sure that we have, the run. I would imagine probably talk to somebody with the Parks Council. So I just wanted to make sure to come down here with all the planning and all the building and everything that's going to be going on. I think it's important, especially since your code references it, that we actually have it enacted. That's all.
That sounds like something for Al.
For help?
Al
Oh.
Peterson. He wants,
Well, I don't-
he wants,
I don't-
he wants trees everywhere. He could
It's
be
not
our-
a matter. It's not necessarily that I want trees everywhere. I just want what says that is in the code for you guys to have somebody that's following with you guys to be a help liaison for you in regards to keeping the existing trees and whatever trees that have to be planted for any kind of more development that goes on taken care of. Because actually the code, if anything, it helps you guys a lot because a lot of the burden actually falls on the people that have property that directly abuts any kind of city-owned trees. So I think there's a lot of great conversation that could be had with it that ultimately would just help the livability again of the community. I'm not trying to be a tree hugger here. I'm just trying to help you guys. It seems to be a very taxed city in regards to the parks and who's going to do this and who's going to do that. Make a commission that you guys already have in your code that you say you have actually exist.
Well,
Or rewrite the code.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you. Rich?
Jacob, can we sometime learn more about that?
Yeah.
A couple minutes. We just talked about affordable building. You have rules for trees. If you go through another third party in between what your rules are already and trying to get this stuff developed, your cost and our time is really slow getting these through already. Could you imagine having a group of people trying to oversee your tree ordinance? You have rules. We live by the rules. You don't need another council to tell you how to run your code. I know we have trees because I'm saving a bunch.
Okay, thank you, Rich.
Yeah, in volume 1, so the development code is volume 2. And in the development code, there's tree rules as far as landscaping, street trees, and then we have our tree preservation chapter, which applies to development and also what the code terms commercial forestry. And then in volume 1, which I've read, occasionally throughout the years, it talks about a tree commission group of sorts. I think which is supposed to provide recommendations to the council like any commission or committee.
Well, is it part of the planning commission's role, or is it a separate?
It's a separate thing,
Oh.
yeah.
But it could be appointed. I mean, we could take on that responsibility, right? Just like we do for historic preservation, that type of thing.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I haven't read it in a while.
Read it and see if we can give it to Shedville.
Well, we have regulations like what for planning and development. There's all the trees that will be saved, and the ones that aren't saved, you have to plant more trees. And so
Yeah,
we're not at a loss for trees. It seemed that every time a permit goes through, if there's something that's cut that's larger diameter, you require more trees to be put in somewhere else.
yes, and then in the development code, and then in volume 1, it talks about public trees, and public trees are any tree on public property in the right of way, and any public tree can only be removed with permission of the city forester. Currently, the city forester is Neil Shepard, the public works field operator. And when someone, there's a tree in the street, and someone doesn't like it, we have our arborist take a look at it to give it a health assessment, and if it's healthy, typically, Neil will say, we need to keep it. I'm sorry. So my guess, with just kind of remembering what I read, was it would be an advisory committee to help with tree policy. But with everything going on right now, I don't know if we have the bandwidth to do that. So I don't know if it should be amended to say as needed or just get rid of it. It's something to think about.
Well, I agree with Rich. I mean, we don't need another layer of trying to get through things.
Well, we already have.
We have it.
Have the rules. I mean, those apartments have to put in 540 trees.
And you got me, the tree hugger. Already branded me that, right?
But I mean, I have a question.
You're the whole committee.
There we go.
There's historic trees in the community that are designated, correct?
I think that the same section in the code that talks about the tree committee or commission talks about historic trees. So that's a good comment. And so
We've had a conversation about watching trees and tree preservation in the past. And so we just need to look at the code and look at what's going on and make sure what our code says is what we're doing, is what matches the vision for the council.
and I don't think we have a formal list, but the list is not very big. Of course, Walnut Tree Park is a fine example of a tree that the city would want to preserve. But that's just, like I said, I haven't read it in a while, so it would take some reading and thought to probably continue this conversation in
before
efficient
next
manner.
week, could you talk to Neil and figure out what we're doing?
Yeah,
tree
I'd
guy?
probably want to talk to our city administrator and kind of see how he wants to steer the ship in that regard. Yeah.
Okie dokie.
Okay, do we have anybody else that would like to make a comment? Not seeing any hands. All right, it's now 7:10 p.m. This is a public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a conditional use permit. The subject property is identified in County Assessor's map as lots 4,800, 5,800, and 5,900 on map 4N 1W-4AC. The applicant is Frank Robinson, Veterinary Services LLC. The owners are Gregory and Monty Nelson, Cheryl and Keith Bickel, and Ronald Stanky, and Betty Ann Trust. Because it's a quasi-judicial proceeding, required the observance of certain procedural formalities, and we will take a few moments to cover those preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte contact or conflict of interest or biases in the matter? Okay, seeing none. Does anybody from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Seeing none. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows. Required statements from staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and discussions. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to City Code ORS 197.7635. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens 17.100.0401A-F. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described, or other criteria in the plan, such as comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Appeals Board. On that issue, and precludes any action for damages in circuit court. All right, Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a conditional use permit. We have to have a public hearing for them. The zoning is Holton Business District, so we're in our Main Street area and basically in the uptown of the Main Street area. It's on a vacant site, previously developed decades ago, but it's been vacant for several decades. They want to construct a new building and site improvements related to veterinarian services for small animals. And if you recall, somewhat recently, we kind of refined our code as far as our animal sales and services categories. And if you recall, there was veterinarian services for large animals and that for small animals. In this particular case, it's a small animal category, so we're talking about dogs and cats, not horses and bison. Or, big animals. So zoning, Holton Business District, it's conditionally permitted, so that's why we have this hearing for comments and a little more scrutiny from the commission instead of me making the decision. I'm just going to breeze through some highlights. In this zoning district, we require a 0-foot setback, and that's what's proposed along St. Helens Street to the north and then 15th Street to the west. And you can see the site plan there. All the typical landscaping stuff in this zoning district, the vision clearance standards at the intersection of streets and driveways does not apply, so we don't have to worry about that. Parking. Now, this zoning district is a little different in that it allows your adjacent or abutting on-street parking to count towards your off-street parking requirement. And so based on the size of the building and the type of use, they would need to have 16 off-street parking spaces. Their parking lot proposed has 12 spaces. And given that there's and this is just looking at one of the streets that abuts this small block. There's about 8 parallel parking spaces along St. Helens Street, which easily makes up the 4 that they're short to make up 16. 12 plus 4 is 16. So that's met. As far as access, Columbia Boulevard to the south is an arterial. St. Helens Street to the north is an arterial, and we don't like to have direct accesses from those if we can help it. And of course, we can in this case. They propose to use 15th Street. Now, 15th Street is actually a collector street, but having the access midway there is good. The one thing, though, we do have a condition about combining the properties for development purposes. There's 3 tax lots, but there's a series of lots of record, even more. And because we want those to be consolidated for access purposes, as well as the fact that this building and its improvements cover at least a portion of most, if not all, we want to make sure that we have they're all tied together. And there's an important thing to recognize with that, because right now this block consists of 3 different ownerships, and to have them kind of glued together, that needs to be unified. I know in a conversation with the applicant, their intent was to attain unified ownership, but they probably want to, go through this process to make sure they're not going to get beat up in the land use permitting, which is something we always recommend anyways before you do too much of your real estate investing. We talked about access. There is an approach on St. Helens Street that we'll want to have replaced to a standard sidewalk. But let's talk about frontage improvements. The Planning Commission has been pretty consistent in the past. When we have existing frontage improvements that are in sound condition, that you have not required those to be rebuilt to the newer standard. And we have our first corridor master plan that this area is in the middle of, and you would have different standards for St. Helens Street and Columbia Boulevard, and then even our transportation systems plan standard for 15th for a collector. They all have a little more elaborate design than just your classic curb tight sidewalk. But in this case, the entire site is curb tight. So I'm assuming, as reflected in the conditions, that you will maintain that stance, not require the frontage improvements to be redeveloped when they're intact and sound. Of course, they'll need to punch in the driveway approach in 15th and replace the one on St. Helens Street. Of course, if you disagree with that, we can discuss it. As a condition of use, there are a variety of things we need to look at in addition to all the typical site design stuff we look at in the development code. And they're all pretty easily met as far as we can find. One thing I want to talk about a little bit more is expanding on the corridor master plan a little bit. So we talked about the frontage improvements. The other thing that that master plan, which was adopted in 2015, so it's not too old, it actually looked at this site as an opportunity area, as a stormwater interpretive gathering place. And the plan noted that it would require acquisition by the city and would be expensive to construct. It was noted as a low priority plan as a result. The city did have an opportunity and contemplated purchasing this property, but did not, and so it's being acquired by someone else. So we don't see a conflict with that plan. Given that has occurred, I don't think we could use that to prohibit development, but the fact that we had an opportunity and didn't just kind of makes that cleaner. As a conditional use permit, you can impose additional time, place, and manner conditions. We didn't really think of anything, but but if we have any testimony that may trigger your thinking or your own thoughts, we can certainly discuss that. We did have some tree discussion about our tree preservation rules, and this is another one where that applies, just like any property in town. This one's kind of interesting because a lot of those properties have been undeveloped, and so they're just kind of the trees that have been there. This one's different in that we know it was developed years ago. We have a survey from the 60s that showed a couple buildings on there, but it's been vacant so long that the trees were able to grow, and now you have some larger trees on there that the code technically applies, and so there is some replacement required, which is typical. Utilities. Water is easy. It's around there's several options to connect to water, at least 3 sides within public rights of way. Sanitary sewer. If you look closely, you can kind of see an outline of a sewer easement. Jenny's helping you out there. That goes down the center of the property. We actually have a sewer main down the center, and so that's probably where they will connect. That sewer line was kind of capped several years ago because it was a lot of stormwater was being infiltrated in there, and so they would either rehab that line or build a new line within that easement is our guess. Storm. Well, it's kind of a hole. We famously call this the Holton Hole, and where does water like to go? It likes to go in holes. So stormwater, I think, is one of the more significant issues for this development. And if you read the plans thoroughly, you would see that they are proposing some on-site detention beneath the parking lot, and they will build some infrastructure in North 15th Street to convey that water to the system, which flows westward. Our city engineer did look at that, and she said it was a good concept. We'll just have to have the more fine-tuned plans following land use approval should you want to approve this permit tonight or at a later date. So staff's recommendation is for approval. We have conditions that reflect the things I talked about and the stuff I didn't talk about in the report because I don't want to bore you to death. It's good. We like to see development in our Main Street project. It adds to the mixed-use flavor. Employees will hopefully eat at the local establishments. It provides local jobs. A lot of good things. And that concludes my part.
Great. Thank you. Could we hear from the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Anne Marie Skinner, business address 4412 Southwest Corbett Avenue in Portland, and I am the applicant's representative. The applicant is, Dr. Robison. He's sitting behind me. First off, I'd like to thank staff for their assistance in this project. They've been a delight. And the doctor is very excited to bring this project and this new building to your city. As was stated by Jacob, this is an unused piece of ground. It has been for over 30 years, and the doctor's excited to utilize it for a lovely building in a mixed-use area. As noted by staff, it is zoned Holton Business District, and the proposed use for this veterinary clinic is allowed with your approval for the conditional use. The applicant feels, of course, and staff concurs, that the submitted application and the plan set and the narrative show compliance with all the criteria necessary to grant approval for the requested use. As Jacob mentioned, the site is currently 3 tax lots under separate ownership. It is the intent for the doctor to own all 3 of those. And as noted again by Jacob, there is a condition requiring either a deed restriction or a lot consolidation through a one-lot partition, and there are no problems complying with that condition. There's an immediate need for this building. The doctor is anxious to get it underway, so he is hoping to begin construction as soon as he has land use approval, followed by the approval of the final engineering plans. And I believe he's hoping to be able to occupy it late spring, early summer. So that's an aggressive building schedule. His builder is Rich Bailey, and he's also back there. So the pressure's on.
Now we know.
Eventually, there possibly is plans for the applicant to develop the remainder of the property. Just as an FYI, I did a kind of a future development plan to plan out a parking lot and a drive aisle, and it potentially shows a small building in that southwest corner, and then a larger building running parallel with North 14th Street. That's all in the future. Uses of those buildings, sizes, etc., would all be unknown. But the intent would be that they would all share the same access, which is this new access off of 15th, and that they would all share, use and maintain the parking lot. And as Jacob noted, street parking is allowed in this particular zone, and this project and future development will take advantage of that. This application presents 8 parallel parking spaces on St. Helens, and I believe there's room, if my memory serves, there's room for 9 or 10 along Columbia. We didn't show those because that would be part of the development for the site plan review as one of those other buildings in the future. At this particular juncture, all the area that's not covered by the building or the parking area will be either landscaped or it will be hydroseeded with a grass seed mix so that it won't just be sitting there as a big hole. And so it'll look nice. It'll be a nice feature for the corner. And also, as mentioned in the staff report and as a condition of approval, we are planting the required street trees along the street frontage where the building is and the required landscaping. And there is a requirement for additional trees to be planted to replace those that are being removed. And so those will be added to the landscaping plan as part of the final approval. The staff report mentions some additional investigation being needed for the proposed sanitary sewer and storm plan to further assess the existing pipes and the facilities for any possible needed repairs. And just for your information, the applicant's project engineer and the contractor are in the process currently of performing that additional investigation to ascertain what repairs, if any, need to be made to the existing system for this project. The staff report mentioned that a geotechnical study would be important for this site, and an actual soil study and geotechnical analysis has already been performed, and that was included in your packet. There are quite a few recommendations for the site, comprising about 4 pages of the report. And so those recommendations will be adhered to by the contractor as he is constructing the building on the site. The CUP approval standards and compliance with each are addressed in the narrative, so I'm not going to bore you with going back through all of those again. Staff concurs with the assessment presented in the narrative, and the applicant requests approval as recommended by staff. along with the staff's proposed conditions. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I have the project engineer here. So if you have any specific questions about the sewer, the storm, the water, he's more than happy to come up and answer those questions for you.
I have a question in regards to the fill material. So if the engineer or Rich or whoever.
And that may require both Rich and the engineer.
Can you just give us a quick summary of what you're going to use as far as fill?
Let's see what the.
Can I get your name for the record?
So yes, my name is Buck Smith with PBS Engineering. Need the address as well?
If you want to give it, sure.
Okay, 4412 Southwest Corbett Avenue, Portland.
Same as her.
Yep. So I think our geotechnical engineers just typically recommend structural fill that meets specific requirements for compaction, as well as kind of the removal of existing organic material and other material, kind of silty material that's collected in that area over the years. So they have recommendations of excavations of roughly 2 feet. So after they scrape off that material, then they'll bring in the fill and bring it in kind of layer by layer, compact it per the recommendations of the geotechnical engineer, and under the supervision of a geotechnical engineer.
Because this has been like this for a number of decades, and because of the depth, does it present any particular problems?
Yeah, and I think our geotechnical engineers are prepared a report in order to address that. And one of those is, of course, just the strippings and removing of all the layers that'll be kind of problematic in the future. So they've kind of outlined their recommendations there, and just kind of importing fill and compacting along those lines.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
I had a question not necessarily for you, but you or Jake, I'm not sure who. Where were the buildings that were on the site originally in the past? Does anybody know?
Yeah, if you look at
What lots were they in?
it's one of your attachments,
I never saw that.
and it shows this survey that was originally from 1959, updated in 1965. One more up, so that it's skewed. So
So there wasn't
you
any
go.
building where this building is proposed then?
no, not exactly. At least as far as we know.
Why is it so deep?
Got a basement.
But there was no building there. No.
Yeah.
There you go.
3-4 levels.
So there's another So there's another building besides these shown here?
Was the import building.
Okay.
And then there were 2 or 3 other buildings here, like the grocery store and
Okay, thanks. I just want to get an idea what had been constructed where before, just an idea what's natives brown.
And I'm glad we have this survey. That'll help with STC credits, so we're not guessing as much.
All right, anybody else? Great, thanks very much for your testimony.
No native brown.
Do we have anybody that would like to testify in support of this development?
They're working overtime.
Well, sure you say.
Again, Rich Bailey. Just a couple things. I think this is an exciting time for the Holton district, seeing a new structure in there. As a kid, I walked by that going to Condon grade school for many years when the import building until it burnt down. There used to be a house over on St. Helens Street over there. And I just, over the years, just looked at this thinking, what a great opportunity to see this cleaned up and see it be a productive part of a Holton district. With what we're doing up for the community action team, that building we just broke ground today, thank goodness. It started raining. But with that going on, and if this goes through, and with the food bank across the street, you're seeing some very positive things for Holton. I think it's just the start of good things to come, you know. So I'm really in favor of this. I think it's a good thing for Uptown St. Helens, and I don't see any negatives about this at all. And I think it'd be a very good business partner for your district too. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rich. Anybody else in favor? Not seeing anybody. Do we have any neutral testimony? Not seeing anybody. Do we have any opposition? Not seeing anybody. Okay, does the commission have any final questions? Okay.
Seems too easy.
Where am I? Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from the staff, the public record is closed. And this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion. I had a couple answers. For me, I was curious about the ownership, having the 3 parcels, and I'm glad to see that they'll all be coming into one. And then the future development plans, that they plan on doing that. So it seems like they're pulling it together even though they don't know what's going to be going on. But the anchor building will be there to be a start. So one other question was, briefly looked at the floor plans, but will there be overnight housing for their clients?
And that's a good question. And I know the record's close, but if there's a nod or something from afar.
Okay.
That testimony was provided during the public record portion.
Yes, thank you.
It's in the report.
It's in there?
Yes, it's in there.
Why don't you
I
tell
believe
me?
There you
well,
go.
'cause
Okay.
She just did.
Okay.
Does that present a problem?
Jacob,
Right, okay.
on the east side of the actual proposed parking area, it looks like a driveway. What is that?
Well, what it is currently, it's a turnaround area. So in our code for higher class streets, collectors and arterials, we want to make sure we have a design that does not beget backing or maneuvering into 15th Street. And I think they're kind of planting the seeds for access to other things. But for now, it's a nice area to maneuver so you can exit the site head first. And then it also provides good access to the trash enclosure for garbage pickup.
Okay, so when this would be finished, it would have access to St. Helens Street?
Doubtfully. Yeah, I given our code, we're not going to favor any access from either arterial. If they need a second access for something, we can consider 14th. Based on some of our pre-app meeting discussions, I think they're going to attempt to serve the entire site from one access. But that's all in the future.
This is only going to be used for construction at the time. That thing that looks like a driveway there.
That's an easement. That's the dashed line. So the shaded area is the asphalt. The dashed line, which actually looks like an extension of that, is an easement.
Sewer line easement,
So it's not a physical improvement. That's the legal easement that's around a sewer line that's right there.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a lot of lines on these things.
Can you show where the sidewalk is that goes to a door that goes to nowhere?
The sidewalk that goes to nowhere.
Well, you said in your report that there was a door.
Oh, there's a door, and you can see it labeled just to the left of the easement, just a little north of the shaded area. You see door with an arrow pointed to it.
Okay.
that was, you don't always get these plans 100% perfect.
Right.
And if I had all the time in the world, I would go through everything and, okay, let's polish all this. But that's impractical. And we did get it polished a little bit with the time that we had, but we wanted to make sure we made this meeting because we know after the holidays, there's probably going to be more stuff going on. And so, we need to have a door that has a walkway in front of it, but that'll just be a plan revision. Typically, the conditions include necessary plan revisions, and that's one of them. So they just make sure that they have a walkway on the east side of the building,
Okay.
which should be an easy condition to meet.
So I'd like to have a discussion about the sidewalks and the transportation plan, upgrade plans that we thought were so cool. When do those happen if they don't happen during development? Piecemeal at a time.
City initiated large projects.
Would that be the only time we would do the bump outs and all the other things that we talked about? Why not do them as properties are developed? Just because there's an old a usable sidewalk there doesn't fit that pattern.
I don't think you can burden the developer or the builder with the public right-of-way improvements.
Yeah.
And so I think that is
Is that why?
program that has to be done in phases for certain areas.
Well, so there's a lot of trains of thought, and if this is a discussion that the Planning Commission has had on other projects.
Yeah.
If we hadn't had the discussion, I probably would have talked about it more in the report. So the question is, what can you require as part of development? Constitutionally, you can require it if there's a nexus, it makes sense, and it's proportional. So let's say, well, we really want to implement some of those newer standards. Making them do the entire block is probably overkill. Having the portion that abuts the development along St. Helens and 15th is something you could discuss. It's one of those tough calls.
I just want to have a discussion.
Yeah, it's one of those tough calls. For me, because we've had this discussion before, that's what the Planning Commission has decided in the past. We look at it, we look sound. We go with what's existing.
So, if I can ask, and I don't mind making myself sound dumb, they will be providing the improvements immediately adjacent to the building they're building now.
There's existing public improvements. So there are existing sidewalks. So they will have to modify those slightly. There's a driveway approach that will need to be replaced along St. Helens Street. And then they'll need to replace a section of the standard sidewalk to put in the driveway approach on 15th. Otherwise, at least based on the conditions as written, those would stay intact. Now, they would still improve the right-of-way to some degree by planting street trees and stuff like that, which advances some of our policies.
Which should be back of the sidewalk rather than in front of the sidewalk, like those.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. And then they will have improvements, but other improvements between the sidewalk and the property line, because the building's going to be on the property line, and so their private walkway will be in the right-of-way too. And so there'll be some improvements, but not specific to our corridor plan.
And the additional improvements will happen when the other part of the site is developed. Is that the general idea?
Well, that'll be a consideration for future development.
Thank you.
Do the sidewalks presently meet handicap access?
A lot of them do have replaced curb ramps, sidewalk ramps, the truncated domes. So a lot of them are not the old school concrete. They have the synthetic material in there. So I assume they do since they've been replaced.
So, my husband is a person who goes around in a little cart. And there are a lot of people in this town that you see driving around in little carts. They need curb cuts and access up. That's part of what's gonna go in adjacent to the first stage, right?
Those are already in place.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, do we have anybody else? All right, we vote on this?
Need a motion.
Motion?
I think that all the questions have been addressed, or so move.
Okay. Motion to approve? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none?
And then a motion for signature.
And a motion for
So moved.
signature? Approved, and final decision, the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice,
Do we need a vote
didn't we vote?
on the last motion? Oh.
The notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or had any comments. The appeal deadline will be included in the notice. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Next, we have 50 Plaza Square, Riverfront District Architectural Guidelines Recommendation.
Okay, so take off your planning commission hats and put on your historic landmark commission hats. Brush the dust off of them. It's been a while since you've wore those.
Beaver hats.
So you are now the Historic Landmarks Commission for at least this agenda item. So whenever we have exterior improvements to buildings in this zoning district here, the Riverfront District, Plaza Subdistrict, we need to look at our architectural guidelines. And so what you are in this case is the recommendation authority to the approval authority, which is staff in this case. So you did look at this once. Couple months ago, we presented the fact that they wanted to remove some of the old false fronts to this building, which is 50 Plaza. Versus dark, you can't see it, but it's very rare that the property, you don't need an exhibit. It's right outside across the plaza. And you didn't have a problem with that. Now they want to do a little bit more, and it's a good thing. But we do have these guidelines, and so we need to take a look at it. And we, at least, as Jenny and I kind of kicked this around, came up with a few things for you to think about. One of the things that the guidelines talk about is kick plates on front doors as a pretty standard feature. And if you look at their plans, it doesn't show the kick plate. But Jenny talked to the applicant, and she actually wrote it on there. I think the concern was whether or not having that would meet disabled person requirements, I think from a weight standpoint. And so that's why one of the suggested stipulations is front doors shall have kick plates if ADA standards can be met. Then the other two stipulations regards a proposed window on the side. So if you look at the side of the building right now, you see just a concrete wall. And I think it's part of a wall of the building that used to be there once upon a time. Now, one thing to be aware of is that is also a property line. And in speaking with the building official, I don't know if they're going to be able to put a window there, given building code and fire code. They could do a lot line adjustment with the county, maybe an easement. It depends what the building official would accept as far as guaranteeing there wouldn't be another building right there. But if they can work that out, we do have a couple of stipulations for the side window. There are some windows proposed on the back, but you can't really see them, so that's not a big deal. You look like you want to ask a question, Sheila.
Is it mandatory that they have the window on that side? And the reason I'm asking is from having had business with a window on the side, it's a wonderful break-in point. We had to put bars at the window, and they still tried to pull the bars out and get into the business. And our saving factor was when Mays extended their building and bricked it in.
Well, the development code doesn't force it. The architectural standards don't force it, but if it's proposed, windows are a key feature of historic buildings, like we've had in some of our past discussions, and like Al has told us in the past too. And so we kind of want to look at those closely. The building code sounds like the major obstacle in this case, and the building code made that may be the final say, that you can't have a window there. So hopefully that kind of answers that question.
So the city is proposing the window? Or?
No, the applicant's proposing the window.
Was there?
We're reacting to the proposal.
Was there a window in the original? There was another building.
There was another building there, yeah. And they provided some historic photos, and I don't think any of them. I'd have to look at them again. But I'm not aware of a previous window. So in any case, if they can get past the building code, one of the stipulations that the side window approximate the same width to height ratio of the individual storefront windows, and that it be more or less the same distance from the ground as a storefront window. So if you're looking at an angle, that window is not alien to the ones in the front. Now, if these recommendations are provided to us and we go, yeah, that makes sense, then we would want to make sure that the building permit reflects those, and that'll be kind of the next, how do we make sure that there's kick plates when the plans don't show it? And there's stuff like that we'll have to work out. But those are the recommendations. The applicant is here, and certainly if you want to talk about it, this would be your time to do so and to answer any questions.
Jacob, I also just want to point out, this is also a review of the sign.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, so thanks, Jenny. Jenny worked on this more than me, so someday she'll be sitting over here and someone else will be sitting there, and that'll make life a lot easier. It's always an evolution. So, yes, there's a sign element to it, too. We didn't see any issue with it. In fact, they had a lot of good examples of old signs. And the sign wasn't in color, but they said it was going to be gold? Yeah, gold, which seemed like appropriate based on the color palette of our guidelines. The sign permit hasn't been submitted, but it's one of those easy sign permits. And so we would incorporate the recommendations that, this proposed sign would meet our guidelines, and then the building permit, which has been submitted. So I guess the recommendation is the sign permit looks okay, and then as far as the building permit, those are the three as noted on page 2 of the memo. So if you want to come up and...
My name is Jennifer Pugsley. I'm the co-owner of 50 Plaza Square, but my residence is 1300 4th Street in Columbia City. Just a clarification, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to walk around town, but most of the storefronts in the district have wooden doors with that wooden kick plate on the bottom, which is what my intention was. In a meeting with Jenny, we realized that the drawing didn't reflect that. So, I have a concern about the wooden doors if they will meet ADA requirements. So that would be the only reason I wouldn't put in a wooden door. My dream is to take this building back to 1928 or as close as possible. So we're excited about it. It's been like unwrapping a package for us as we've taken everything off. Found some interesting details to the building, and as far as cutting in the window, it's fairly dark inside the building. Restoring the mezzanine windows, which are at the top above just below the lintel, but above that, what is the awning over there now, I think will really help bring light in, but we're looking for other ways to get more light inside the building. So, and obviously the benefit of that would also be to see the courthouse and, peak of the river there. So,
Would you be opposed to a skylight?
there's actually a giant, that's one of the features that we found inside the building was a giant skylight. I think it's going to be cost prohibitive to restore that skylight. It does have a new membrane roof on it that we've already completed. Skylights scare me a little bit as far as upkeep and leaking, so, but it has been considered to do that.
Would putting in that window on the side, would that have any, what would that do to the historic nature of the building? Anything?
Well, right now what you're seeing when you go over there is I believe, is the Dillard building is actually attached to the building, the old Dillard building that was condemned and taken down.
Mhm.
It was a surprise to see that there when we working on it, one of the features that we hadn't anticipated. So we brought in a structural engineer to make sure that we could cut the window in. That was my biggest concern. I don't feel like I'm an authority on whether or not it's historically correct, but I certainly don't think it would take away from it. And our intention is to not make it an operable window, but to make it match the storefront that we're trying to put back in.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're talking about a window that matches the style of the rest of the whole
Yes.
building.
Yes.
And not removing the old wall of the Dillard building.
No.
Which is an additional to your building, right?
Right.
So
It doesn't come out very far, does it?
No, and we've had a structural engineer look at it, and he's comfortable with it. He set the guidelines on the size of the window, in fact.
Right.
So.
Have you priced out Fireglass? What it costs?
No, I have not.
Change your mind.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? All right.
Will it be a real estate office? Is that what I'm
It'll be a
guessing?
real estate
Okay.
office.
All right. Didn't say anywhere.
For now.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's a good question. We knew that. It was just, permitted use, no bureaucracy to go through for that.
Great.
Just asking.
Do we have any other people who would like to comment? Come on up, Al.
This is the first time I've seen this, but I can't quite understand the proposal on the doors. Are the doors proposed to be put back as wood, or because the drawing shows them as storefront doors?
Yeah, it sounds like that was probably as
that drawing shows them as storefront.
Jennifer noted, her desire is the classic wood door, and if the recommendation from the commission was for the kick plates, we would want to make sure the permit reflects that, and we'd probably talk with our building official.
Can I ask her a question then?
Sure. Yeah.
Are you planning on replacing the aluminum doors that are there now? ADA requirements require that the bottom rail be 10 inches. So it's essentially a kick plate. And I don't know if you've contacted a storefront person yet, but you might want to inform your storefront person that he needs a 10-inch bottom rail anyway, and that'll take care of the kick plate question. So if they install a 10-inch bottom rail on the aluminum doors, the ADA question goes away. And it more or less also solves the question about kick plates. I'm not exactly sure how, I suppose since there are existing doors and you can replace them, but any new door typically requires a 10-inch kick plate on the bottom, or not a kick plate, a 10-inch style or rail. It's really the rail on the bottom anyway. And if you recommend a 10-inch, the front door has to meet the 10-inch rail on the bottom. That solves that problem or that question.
So you think the ADA requirements are going to help support?
Yeah, I haven't looked into this question. I'm sometimes surprised why you still get storefront doors in catalogs with the narrow 4-inch rail when the ADA, federal ADA rules require a 10-inch rail. And I'm baffled by it, but I've never really researched it. So
You say rail, you mean the bottom of the door?
yeah, the bottom, in a wood door, it would be the bottom board.
Yeah.
It's the bottom rail. It's called the rail. The
Okay.
stiles are the verticals,
Yeah.
and the rails are the horizontals.
Okay.
And the bottom rail, according to the ADA, needs to be 10 inches.
Like that 1950s drawing?
Exactly.
For wheelchairs and that type of thing.
Yeah, so basically when you roll up to it, you can use your foot to open the door. That's what it's for. I mean, that's why they do it. The other comment I have is about the side window. Structurally, I don't think it's a problem, and her structural engineers looked at it. Usually, when I've run into this issue twice in my career. Once was on a high-rise building in Philadelphia, and in that case, what the Philadelphia Fire Department required, because the whole building had to be sprinklered anyway. This building's too small to require sprinklers, but they allowed them to keep the windows because the building was a historic building built before any building codes. They allowed them to keep the windows. They basically informed them, and I don't know if they required them to put it on a deed or not, but basically informed them that if anybody ever builds something next door, they're going to lose their windows. And then related to that high-rise that I worked with, they did not want to put sprinklers on the outside of the building because the way the sprinkler code was written. So the fire department allowed them to put the sprinklers just on the inside, just above every single window, to more or less achieve the same thing, but not have to worry about freeze protecting the sprinklers. But that's a side issue because it doesn't apply to this building anyway. However, it can be achieved through an easement. It can, and in fact, the rear door on the U.S. Bank building, or what is now the vault, was achieved by getting an easement from the county. That's one way to achieve getting a window on the side. The other way, which is kind of depends on how one wants to look at it, is windows are allowed when you have a public way. This is technically a park, but it's under public ownership. So it kind of depends on how one looks at it and whether or not the county has any future plans of doing anything with that other than a park. So that's kind of two ways that they could probably work through this problem with this window or not. From a historic standpoint, the main facade is really this facade. The side facade is a secondary facade, and the rear facade is a secondary facade. So I don't think it has much of an impact in terms of historic preservation. I can appreciate wanting to get light in there. When I was in Philadelphia, I did do a building where we proposed windows on the side, and if you read the Secretary of Interior's standards on historic preservation, they tend to look down on it. However, that is a case where they're trying to really look at kind of the main facade, and like I said, this is a secondary facade. So as long as they're willing to accept that if somebody in the future builds a building and they're going to lose that window, unless they somehow acquire an easement or some other legal means of keeping it, I think it would be fine, personally.
There's a technicality
Yeah, because
So-
it's a party wall, and a party wall technically has to have a 2-hour fire separation. And the only way to achieve a 2-hour fire separation is buying architectural fiberglass, or achieve a shift in the property line by easement or some other means.
So if this building was a locally designated landmark, this would be a public hearing, I think, and you would be the decision maker reviewing the standards of our historic preservation ordinance. It's not a designated landmark. And that's why instead of that chapter, we look at our architectural guidelines. So it's, I mean, the intent is so it kind of jives with the historic feel, but it's not historic preservation per se.
I'm not sure who will be the one that knows the answer to this question, but if the applicant wants a window there and the window is facing county property, is there some necessity for the applicant to walk by the county with that, or is it a free fall?
Well, I think given the building code, they probably need to have a conversation with the county. Because obviously to get an easement, they'll need coordination with the county, so the county grants that. Unless the building official can think of something else. But that's going to be a applicant and building official discussion. For us, it's just a matter, if possible, does the window comply with our standards?
So my second part of that question is, there was a mention of architectural fire grade glass. Is that something that would make or break this choice?
I don't think we care as far as our standards.
Have to meet building code.
Yeah, that's going to be a building code thing. But if you go with what we're talking about in here, as long as the window approximate the same height and width ratio and the same distance from the ground, be it glass from the 17th century or transparent aluminum from Star Trek 4, we don't care.
It's getting too late for this.
Do we really care if there's a window on the side?
Well, apparently.
Someone can build next to it. It's just the front that we're looking at.
Well,
We look at exterior
looking-
improvements.
We're looking at it for the whole
understand
thing.
that, but the secondary window there doesn't really
Anyway,
do anything.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to make
No,
a
real.
comment?
Seriously, if someone can build right next to their window,
do we have?
it's not a real big issue.
No, and it's
Front is.
and it's not our issue. Our issue, if the window's there, we just want to make sure. And she wants it to look like the storefront window, so we're not going to have to arm wrestle.
No, it's just the front.
Can I get off the window for a sec? So, and one of the photos here looks like kind of a mansard kind of roof to match up the piece of wall from the old building on the right, on the side. What are you doing about that? Are you keeping that, or 'cause that's not very 20s, not very 20s look to it. Yeah. Okay, just curious what you wanted to do with that. Yeah, I got that.
This is her building. This is
Just wondered how you would do it.
Well, putting my restoration hat on, the wood doors, they're done all the time for handicap, so that shouldn't be a problem. I think once you look into saw cutting the wall and the price of the glass to meet the code, you might go back and look at that skylight option. I know you already probably covered it with a roof and everything, but there are people around it that can do that very well. And to celebrate that with a skylight, I think you might look into that. The font size on your letters for real estate seems to be bigger than the history. what I see here, but maybe not. It just seems a little big from looking straight on. I'm not a sign guy, but just looking at what the historic pictures of it, the signage was just
These are
a
pretty
little
big.
smaller than what I see you proposing. That's just a comment of mine. And then that piece of the old building next to your building, I think you should sandblast that and celebrate that jagged concrete. I'm done.
Let's talk a minute. Just, I know we talked about a lot, but let's talk about that sign. Is there a way to, I mean, we have the historic photos. Is there a way to
Scale it?
scale it?
Yeah, I think when they have to get a permit. And I think if we discussed with it, they know that it was my issue anyway. They could come back and give the accurate of what the sign guy is going to do.
I think that's a good point.
Sure.
Yeah. I see.
Do we have is the ordinance address that size?
Yeah, the ordinance does. So for wall signs, what the ordinance says is when you have an entrance that has a entrance to the public, it can make up as much as 8% of the facade, and there's a maximum. So if you have a huge building,
So when they come in for permit, it'll all be dialed into what fits your requirements.
But is that 8%? Does that take into the historic nature of the building?
No. So this becomes an interesting question, because if we look at the sign rules, it says letter style should be proportioned, simple, and easy to read. And so then, well, what's proportioned in regards to the architectural standards? And looking at other stuff, proportion to emphasize special shapes. So if it fits within that, it seems cool. Appropriately scaled. Yeah, that would be kind of I guess the question would be, how would you word that? Should it be slightly smaller? Should there be a little more negative space around the perimeter of real estate?
I mean, she provided all these examples of historic signs from the past, and most of them seem to take up
Between,
almost the entire storefront for the majority of them.
The rosary.
And, I think considering this section, I feel like that's meeting the intent.
Isn't that the section that had the economy store or whatever written in there?
From
No.
an older, this.
That's a different.
Talking about this?
That's a different
No,
building.
not that one.
No, it's the
Keep going.
examples. The
Down?
examples.
Economy grocery.
Yeah, Economy grocery.
Further down.
No, that looks like a different building.
There.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that?
It's an example.
This is just an example of signage from the same
Yeah,
era.
it's not the
Well,
building.
I understand that.
That's not the same.
But
building.
isn't that the same area that they're putting real estate in?
Yeah, on this building. Yeah, that's an example of another building. But yes, yep, you're right.
So as long as it fits within those boundaries, it's correct.
I think clearly if the proposal was to use 1980s sci-fi font, we'd have a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
agree
the
with
font's
that.
fine. It's just seemed a little big for, you're so close at the square here. Yeah. And not much. I mean, it's almost there. It's just felt a little strong.
Yeah. So you could recommend that the decision maker consider a little bit more negative space, and we'll try to figure out how to
Letters smaller.
Who is the decision maker?
That's what he's-
staff.
What he's saying.
Oh, okay.
You're going to sit there and go,
Well, we'd have to think about, okay, how are we going to deal with this? But these kind of things, that's
And we're going to be
Kinda
staring
part
at
of
it every planning commission.
so then you can beat us up if we get it wrong.
for years to come.
Al,
The issue, if you look at those other examples that we're worried about, is this example has less letters.
Yeah.
Therefore, the letters
Or bigger.
are much
Stand out.
bigger and wider
Yeah.
than other examples that you're seeing.
Yep.
So you see proportionally the lettering of this one, it takes up much, it seems much bolder than the other examples that you're seeing.
Yeah.
because
Agree.
You have just more letters in those other examples.
Maybe it needs another
But you could take
another
away
word.
from that
Yeah.
boldness by shrinking it.
Right, and I think
Or
that
thinner.
if you look proportionally at those other examples, there's slightly more, to use Jacob's term, slightly more real estate above and below the letters themselves.
Mhm.
If you analyze, the actual proportions. And I
Yeah.
think that's what Russ is keying in on, is that this particular example just seems a little bit bolder and more.
In your face.
So if you put real estate office, it'll spread out.
Well, real estate, see, yeah, just use more letters.
That's
yeah.
Yeah.
That says it, yeah.
Oh, God. I don't know. If we
I
want
think that's
that
cool.
far.
I agree with you.
You remember what happened in the 1920s? I don't know if we want to go back.
Headed there maybe, huh?
Yeah.
We're going to fake it up.
Fine.
I will
So
buddy
let's make
it
a-
personal.
Let's make a recommendation before this gets too far out of.
Yeah, yeah.
It's classy.
Yeah.
Well, Jacob, the sign permit's gonna come to you,
Yes.
so does it come to us because,
We were hoping to do it right now. That-
Well, so what? So your if one of your recommendations regards the sign permit, we'll consider that recommendation for when that permit's submitted. Of course, she'll know, and we'll kind of discuss it and see where we can end up.
that's fine, yeah. We don't need to see this again.
Yeah.
No.
We're looking for feedback based on, with these standards, it's good to have multiple minds thinking about it.
We trust you.
I guess I have one more comment that I just can't keep inside. The sign needs to be clear to see and easy to understand, but it can also be attractive.
There you go. We don't care about it.
Yes, we do.
So are you ready
Care
for
what it says,
recommendation?
just so it's pretty.
I think we did, didn't we?
Well, now how are we following through? We want a recommendation?
Understand.
So,
Look at them.
based on what I'm hearing, I'm assuming you're going to go with the 3 recommendations in the memo.
Right.
And then I sense a possibility of a recommendation for the sign part,
Sign expert over here.
that there's more negative space around between the frame, for lack of a better term, and the letters or real estate, as Al coined the term.
Well, it might be all cleared up if you have more letters. I mean, she's not set on real estate.
I think maybe consider, maybe your recommendation is consider the proportionality of the letters
To the space.
to the space
There you go.
compared to other examples.
Perfect.
That's fine.
Great.
Brenda.
There you go.
Perfect. Excellent.
That's our recommendation.
All right,
I love
We can beat something up to death, can't we?
yeah.
it. All right.
Our job is picking nits.
Work it.
Do we have a motion?
Well, it's just a recommendation, right?
There's recommendation.
Yeah, we should get a motion so we're,
So
know.
moved.
Second it.
Seconded. Okay, moved and seconded that we approve what we just talked about.
It's all,
That worked.
That
it's all
works, yep.
down.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Nay.
Bless you. I hope it's easier than it was tonight for you.
Well, this is free. There's no cost to this
Yeah.
exercise. So
No.
Right. Okay. Now we're moving on to commission term expiration day update.
Okay, so we tried really hard to advertise to kick Sheila and Audrey out, but we didn't find any takers. Now,
Wow.
the ad ends on Friday,
There's still hope.
and today we haven't received any. So for efficiency's sake, because in order, what we're hoping is, if everything kind of plays out right now as we assume that we don't get any applicants in the next few days, that we can get a motion from the commission, because we need the motion from the commission for the council to reappoint. So the motion would be, and you can disagree, of course, but to renew Audrey and Sheila, assuming no applicants by December 14th. If we do get applicants, then we'll convene the interview committee and go through that process. And that'll null and void your motion. We just want to be efficient if nothing happens. Of course, you can say, well, we resist you and we're not going to do that. But that's the discussion.
I mean, it's neither here nor there, but I feel more comfortable. I mean, it's out there. I mean, what is middle of January for the city council to get the recommendation as opposed to the first meeting in January? I mean, it almost sounds. I mean,
We would be short two commissioners in January if we don't do it this way. Because their terms expire.
We're just trying to be efficient.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean,
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah, their term would expire and it would be, we would.
yeah.
I move that we be efficient.
Yeah, with the
Yeah. No.
with the understanding that if anybody comes forward, then we have to withdraw.
Yeah, then your motion is null and void, and we do it the way we do when we get applicants as normal.
Okay. We have a motion for that.
Second.
Second it? Okay. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays? Passes. Okay. Ready?
Skin of your teeth,
Acceptance
dude.
agenda. Planning and miscellaneous.
So moved.
Second.
I miss all that again. Okay, acceptance agenda.
We've already.
There was a motion on the floor.
Oh, we have a
And
motion.
you second it.
Oh,
So just
second it.
get everyone to vote.
Okay, vote. Ayes.
Aye.
Aye.
Nays. Passes.
It's a lot of stuff for
Oh, I'm.
November and December, isn't it?
It was.
Of course, part of it's because we didn't meet in November.
Right.
And I forgot how to do everything, so.
I just mean the list of
Oh, no,
stuff
you-
that
no, you-
occurred.
Yeah. Okay, now we go on the acceptance agenda.
I think we already did that.
We did that.
We're on planning
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah. Okay, fix it, will you? You know how to.
Is this Groundhog Day?
Okay, plan director decisions.
So where's 175 Bowling Alley?
175 Bowling Alley
Is it a bowling alley?
used to be
By the bowling alley?
used to be something Sykes. That is the drive-through coffee place behind
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when they built that road.
And so, actually, close to when I started, the council renamed that, or I guess named it Bowling Alley.
Not cute.
And then when we were reviewing this lot again, the fire marshal commented on, giving this a Sykes Road access is not very good for emergency response because it's not very well associated with Sykes.
Yeah.
Right.
It doesn't have a whole lot of Sykes frontage, and you have some stormwater stuff, and so it's kind of set back. And so they requested, from an emergency response standpoint, for us to readdress that site, thus 175 Bowling Alley.
There you go. Makes sense.
So is there new food carts going in there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so we're using our temporary use permit process to allow. We've used it for years to allow single, food service units, as I call them, but the trucks, trailers, and recently we've had interest in pods, and so we're continuing to use our temporary use permit process. And what the pod is just more than one of those units.
Up to 1 year, right?
Yes, this is a temporary use permit, so it's something that we could revisit, because it's dynamic, it can change, and we want to be able to just look at it every year, and if everything's going swell and no complaints, no injuries, they could renew it.
And if I read the application correctly, they're proposing to put in sanitary restrooms.
No.
I thought they were going to drop a couple.
No, they are the barbecue place building has a restroom facility.
Okay.
You get into when we look at all of our codes, we actually have a portable privy policy. We're government, we have policies on all kinds of things. Tree committees, portable toilets, all kinds of stuff. So, and the portable privy rules specifically say they're only allowed for short-term. Well, I can't remember exactly what it says, but it says that the superintendent is the one that makes the call, and when we discuss it with Public Works, they don't think that the portable privy meets the intent of this. So then you get to building code stuff. And originally they wanted to have a big tent. But the building code would have to consider that and require additional, and I think disabled accessible portable privies. But because our other code doesn't allow that, that didn't work. But they can use existing restrooms, which is fortunate because when you have a portable thing like this, people eat, drink. You don't want them using the bushes or something like that. Obviously, that would be a nuisance.
Well, also the health code requires a sink.
Yes.
For employees that would use the privy, there has to be a sink.
And I think usually the units have sinks built into them.
They're required to have 5 gallons of water that drains into something else. Do we have any regulations on disposal of gray water and everything out of these?
Oh yeah.
I haven't visited that.
In fact, our wastewater treatment staff, because there's an increasing interest in these, wrote and adopted some new rules that pertain to them. I don't remember exactly what they are now, but we do have rules specific to them for grease traps, and stuff like that.
They have to fill out a survey that says, what are you doing with your waste? And
They have to get inspected too.
Certified location.
We got inspected at our restaurant today. And so I was talking, I said, who's taking care of Columbia County? And he goes, I am. I'm Multnomah County, but I go out to Columbia County when they need me. So he said it's quite a mess.
No, that's Columbia County.
There you go.
So I have a question. There was a food cart. Essentially, it was in a little kind of a cabin building that I really enjoyed. Temporarily allowed, and all of a sudden it went away. Why are we offering people the opportunity to have a business and be successful and get customers, and then, too bad, so sad, your time's up?
Are you talking about Log Cabin Coffee?
No, it was a fish place.
His rent went up, so he.
The fish and chips place that was permanently allowed because it was in the building. I think the business failed.
Yeah, no.
Or they decided to give up. I don't know why it stopped, but.
Yeah, he got.
Oh, okay.
Catherine, that's the Barn Fire Barbecue now.
Yeah, okay, that's,
So the building's still there.
well, what I'm concerned about is not necessarily that exact business, but, the people who have food carts are in business and they want to prosper. I don't quite understand why we only allow them X amount of months and then they have to go somewhere else.
They don't have.
We're not. No. We're not saying that. What we're saying it's allowed under temporary use. And it's something that we can relook at if there's problems. So they get their first year and then they can renew it for a second year. After the second year, they'd have to reapply for the temporary use permit. If things are going smoothly, we could easily reissue that. But the reason for that cycle is because it is portable and dynamic and things can change as opposed to, a building with a foundation that's fixed. The other comment that I'd like to make on that matter is our temporary use rules, we could easily interpret them to say, this isn't allowed, sorry, we're just not going to let you do it at all. But we're trying to be flexible with them, and so we're using our temporary use permit rules to allow them.
Thank you. I
Sure.
really appreciate a higher level of understanding.
Oh, yeah.
I want to.
Very much.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if there's enough parking back there.
Parking is something that we do consider.
Because that's such a narrow strip that.
Yeah, what we require are 2 spaces per unit, and their plan did show that with a shared parking agreement with Rite Aid, and the bowling alley. And so that's one of those things. So let's say the bowling alley started to get full, and we're like, well, we're not going to honor this agreement. That would be one reason where they may have to stop. This site is so funky and weird.
Yeah,
it's a real tough one to use. And it's nice to see someone.
Might be a good use for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing on this one is, so obviously it's a drive-through now, and during the duration of the temporary use, they will use the drive-through building as a walk-up building because obviously the drive-through will be blocked.
You're talking about the coffee cart then, yeah, being a drive-through, yeah.
So it'll be a walk-up unit along with the portable units. So you'll have 2 permanently fixed ones: the barbecue place, the coffee place, and then however many of the food units we allowed. Was it 6? Okay.
One of the things, since we're getting interest in these pods or multiple food carts, how difficult would it be for the city to include in its code about porta potties being part of the dynamic, being included? What would the drawbacks be? What would the liability be?
I think you need more carts than
Well, what
one location.
what I'm talking about is if these pods become of an interest, like in Portland where you have so many pods, you have to have some kind of restroom facility on site. Well, that's what I'm getting at. I think that it's important before the problem becomes a problem.
Well, when we review them, the ones we have, the 2 pods we have, the one on the corner of US 30 and Eilertson, we're able to work it out that they could use that building as their seating, as long as there's no tenants. That provides them a lavatory. And one of the findings that we make is there is a lavatory available, because if there wasn't, that would create problems. It could be changing the code, or it could even be a change of staff.
But I don't think that you can rely on somebody else to allow people to use their restroom facilities. I mean, it might work in 1 or 2 cases, but I don't think that as part of a policy you can do that.
And we haven't. The sites, the ones we've approved, the restroom facility is on site. It's on the subject property of the temporary use permit.
But what about the one that's being proposed on Bowling Alley Way?
There's an existing lavatory in the former Fish and Chips building.
and they will allow
Yes.
use.
Yeah. Yep.
But we can't. But I guess that still doesn't answer the question, because we should consider a policy for in the future, if more pods, are proposed elsewhere, that we can't rely on utilizing somebody else's building or facility. That if we are going to allow the pods, then the pod should provide the restroom facility.
Yeah, that's one of those things. We'll kind of think about it. Frankly, there's a lot going on right now.
Well,
it's not very high on the list.
Well, I understand that, but
I totally get what
Right.
you're commenting on.
So I have a question to improve my own understanding. These pods are on owned property.
Yes.
Wouldn't it make sense to make the property owner provide the restroom?
I think that's what's happening in this case.
That's what's happening. Yeah. That's when we examine it. That's one of the things we talked to them about. And in these both cases, there was something available, so we could say, okay, great. This will alleviate that problem because it's available on the subject property.
Is that language readily accessible to people who want to start a business and know that they will use their property? If they're renting out their property, they have to provide a lavatory or...
A pre-application meeting is standard. It's mandatory by the code. We've created a memo which highlights all the things someone who wants this kind of business to have to help keep us on track, and so they're not surprised.
That sounds like you've got it covered then.
Yeah.
Yay.
I just have a quick question. Kay, the accessory structure permit on Pittsburgh Road, is that the garage that we looked at where they wanted to have a different access before? And they're
Yes, so they
Basically-
revised their plan. They obviously didn't use the variance.
they turned the garage around probably, right? And pushed it.
They used the existing driveway and just moved the garage further past the house.
So they were able to make it work.
I thought they
There
could.
you go.
I thought they could. All right. Thanks. Good. Good for them.
And we didn't have to put in another driveway.
No.
That's the way it works.
I think, the whole pod thing I think is really neat because it's giving people an opportunity to maybe start a business at a lower rate and then hopefully become a brick and mortar business.
They're tomorrow's entrepreneurs and restaurant owners.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, that's
Didn't mean to change the subject. If you-
I mean, owning a brick and mortar one, that's like, yeah. They're not under the same standards in a lot of ways.
no, but I mean to get there, like hopefully get there, like
Stepping stone.
stepping stone.
Because they don't have to pay the system development charges and
But I mean, that's how noise is there. I mean, Quees that closed, that's how noise is there. They built a clientele in a cart, and when a building became available, it was pre-existing restaurant, and they came in there. So, yay,
Yeah.
we don't have an empty
There's-
storefront, we have
there's
another
example.
restaurant.
There's an example.
But Russ brings up the issue. In some communities it's kind of controversial because the brick and mortar owners, there's a sense of fairness. In St. Helens, we haven't really had pushback.
We don't have much.
Unfortunately,
a lot of
so far it's
restaurants either.
been.
You don't have a lot of restaurants, sit-down restaurants either. But I want you to understand. I wasn't being critical of the city for not, considering the restroom facilities. It's just an issue that I think you have to look at when you have multiple trailers providing food, and you're going to have more and more people utilizing these services. And I understand that the property owners in these two cases are allowing people to utilize the restrooms facilities that are already there. But in next month or 6 months down the road, somebody comes in and wants to put a pod on a vacant lot in the city, and there are no facilities. Then what do we say?
Yeah, I think we'd have to say no.
Well, either that or they would provide a porta potty.
Which our superintendent wouldn't allow. So then it would be a no.
Well, unless we change the code.
Back to the original question.
That
Yeah.
comes back to us.
Yeah, which is volume 1, which doesn't require planning commission input at all. The council can just adopt it. You could always make a recommendation.
There you go. All right.
Are we moving on?
I have no more questions.
Okay. Planning Department activity reports. That's it? Okay. Information items?
Yes. We know how much you love corridor plan meetings. Did you hear those murmurs? That's great.
Yes.
See, we know Dan's enthusiastic. So,
but I can't make it here on time.
We're getting towards the end, and for some of you who've been around a lot, the final meeting, other than the adoption process, is a joint meeting with the council and planning commission.
It's early.
And so we're looking at the third Wednesday in February.
Wednesday.
Isn't that right? No,
Yeah, so February 20th at 6 o'clock.
as the joint meeting. And some of it's going to be stuff you've seen, but there's also going to be some, code stuff too. So I just put that in your calendar as something to think about.
I can make that.
6 o'clock.
'Cause I'm here in town on Wednesdays.
But luckily that project's starting to wrap up.
And I would just note that that's tentatively scheduled, so once we formalize it, we'll let you know. But just mark your calendar and pencil it in.
I have a question for Jenny.
I might have an answer.
I was reading we call these Eclipse articles, work from the Spotlight actually, that the city council approved for a consultant to determine where the wetlands are in the Boise property. Is that a delineation or an expansion of the local wetland inventory?
Delineation.
Okay.
See, you didn't even see my lips move.
But it sounded a lot like Jacob too.
Yeah, pretty good.
I don't know if it's
Did you see the
appropriate
contract?
or not, but how do
Oh,
you
it's
feel
still
about that in general?
I think it's great.
How do you
Should.
feel about cutting trees down that are not in the wetland?
Well, I'm the tree hugger, right? So
I know, me too. So I was wondering if I set up a date and time, if we could go over there and guard them.
Well, so there's in our tree preservation ordinance, there's it talks about when a tree removal permit is required, and that's when it's in a sensitive land or when it's commercial forestry. And commercial forestry, from memory, so take this with a grain of salt, is removal of 10 or more trees per acre within a certain amount of time to sell. So the idea is that if you want to harvest timber for sale, you're supposed to have a tree plan, which is the same one required for development, that talks about what you're going to keep and preserve. And I think the intent of that is because the whole point of the tree preservation ordinance is that so you have a certain amount of tree canopy in the city, and that you do not result
you want it to look like
in a net loss.
like Oakland.
And so that provision is there to essentially prevent clear cutting, which I only recently discovered, and I told John about it.
I guess it's a question. I'll ask it in front of you, and Jacob can answer it from my standpoint. For development of that property, would the city, just like anybody else, have to have a plan? Do you know what I mean? Like, just like everybody that came here for a hearing, you have to have a plan. Here's our map. These are where our buildings are going to go. These are the trees that are going to be cutting down. This are the wetlands delineated. Not just, we think we might do this, so we're going to do stuff as we go.
Well, yeah.
So would the city be required to have a full plan for that land, or would they be able to do it piecemeal?
You're gonna try and inventory all the trees then?
It's a wetland delineation. So
Well-
they're delineating the wetland before they move to the next phase.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see from Jacob if he knew, do we have to have a plan for the whole thing just like a customer would?
Well, the question is, where does it say in the code that the city is exempt?
Okay.
And I don't know where it says
But
that.
that's the way we normally would do things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. A site plan.
Right.
Okay. I just want to have the right words when the conversation comes up.
So just a clarification, because this article sounds like you're going to look here, look here, look over there. It's going to be a delineation of the entire property, right?
You know, you can find the scope in the council packet. The full scope.
Yeah, there's just
Why
conversation
don't you just ask
about
Stacy?
where the wetland is.
I know Stacy.
That's what I'm saying, though. When council authorized the contract, it's in the packet.
Yeah, it's all the wetlands identified on our local wetlands inventory, except the one within the ACSP parcel, 2B parcel, because it's clearly, I think it was just some water reservoir for the mill. If you go out there, man, there's no wetland here.
Even the one that I commented on before as a commissioner, that you wanted to change from locally significant to not significant, that one by the water, remember that? Oh, you weren't here. Skip was here.
I think no, they did that. That was adopted.
Yeah, I know.
Are you talking about the little finger along the water?
Yeah.
That's one that's not being delineated because we're not going to develop that.
Yeah.
Site.
But
you wanted it.
The ones where there could be development, yeah, all those, and then also to understand the riparian boundary along the creek.
Well, only thing I'm saying is, I mean, I'm just going to put my consultant hat on. I tell my clients, have me look at the entire property. Don't just look at piecemeal little spots here and there. That's just dumb. Because what if you change your plan and you develop somewhere else? Oh, now I got to hire to look at that little piece over there. Just look at the whole thing. Map all the wetlands. Not just where you think you might do some development.
That's basically what we're doing, with a couple exceptions where we don't think anything's going to happen.
Well, except for, when it's way out or whatever, Okay. Just a suggestion.
No, I hear you, man. Yeah, we want
because it's the same amount of money to put a report together.
We
get it reviewed.
We want to know where everything's at.
Do it all at once,
so we can plan. But it's a lot of property, and obviously we want it to develop.
This looks like a pretty small contract. That's why I was. That's why I don't think they're covering the whole thing.
There can always be amendment. You know, if something's discovered, we said to identify some that may not be identified on our local wetland inventory. I mean, that was part of the conversation.
So the local wetland inventory did cover the local inventory did cover this area.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but it's not a delineation. This will be much more.
The old school '90s inventory.
This will be much more detailed than an inventory.
Yes, and part of the scope is DSL concurrence.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. Won't be me. It'll be another Daniel. Okay.
Anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Move you adjourn. Okay, all in favor, adjourn?